Good to Zev. I hope you had a wonderful Shabbos with Natan. We're continuing in Avodah Zarah, Perek Beis, Mishnah Vav. Hopefully we'll finish Perek Beis today. So the Mishnah begins, Elu Dvorim shelo yivdiku chovim asurim ve'ein isuran isurano. This Mishnah lists foods of Avodah Zarah, of Akum, that are only also ba'achila, that are only prohibited to eat. And the list, as we'll see, includes foods into which the idolater may have mixed a prohibited food. Also included in the list of the Mishnah are a number of foods that are also, that were prohibited by Chazal in order to create a distance and a separation from being socially involved with idolaters, which of course could lead, Rahman al to intermarriage. You see that the Rav says in the very beginning, Apas v'Hashem en asurin mishum chasnus, because of the chashash that it would lead to intermarriage. So let's see the Mishnah inside. Elu dvorim shelo yivdiku chovim asurin. These items of idolaters are prohibited. Ve'ein isuran isurano. But their prohibition is only an isur achila, not an isur ano, not a prohibition to derive benefit from them. The isur is only to eat them. What are they? So the Mishnah begins, chalav shechalavoy oivdiku chovim ve'ein Yisrael ro'eyu. Milk that an idolater milked without a Jew seeing the actual milking process. Ve'apas ve'ashemesh shelahem. And the bread and oil of idolaters is likewise also. What is this about cholav akum? So the halacha is that milk of a kosher animal is always kosher, while milk of a non-kosher animal is not kosher. Kol hayoytze min hatohor, tohor. Kol hayoytze min hatomeh, tomeh. Milk which comes out of a kosher animal is kosher always. Milk that comes out of a non-kosher animal is always non-kosher. Now the truth of the matter is that although it's easy and possible to recognize the milk of non-kosher animals because it has a slightly off-white color, nevertheless, we are concerned that if a Jew is not present for the milking, the idolater would mix the less expensive non-kosher milk with the kosher milk in an amount that will not be noticeable. Now, unlike items used in idolatry, which are also behano, it is permissible to have ano, to derive benefit from most foods that are prohibited by the Torah, such as meat or milk of non-kosher animals. And therefore, the issue of an idolatrous milk prohibits only drinking the milk. Just as an aside, I want to mention the very famous tshuva of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein about cholav akum, that Rabbi Moshe long ago wrote the tshuva in which he says that any country, such as in the United States and America, where the USDA and the FDA and all the other governmental agencies which strictly enforce the kind of milk that may be processed in all of the farms of the United States, and that is only cow's milk, which the Moshe calls the Cholav HaMedina, and that is the famous heter of Moshe to use Cholav Stam, not Cholav Akum, because it's not Cholav Akum, because today's milk in this country has nothing to do with Akum. It's Cholav HaMedina. The Medina, meaning the United States of America, has very rigid regulations, which, from my experience in the OU, I'm also well aware of the fact that were a farm to try to sell milk, cow's milk, milk from a camel, they'll be shut down the next day. They're good. They're gone for good. The regulations is that which Rabbi Moshe said creates the heter of Stam Cholav, of Cholav HaMedina. Then the Mishnah said about Apas ve'Hashemen shelahem, the bread and the oil of idolaters. These two items of idolaters, breads and oils, and the one that follows in the Mishnah, that of cooked foods, were prohibited in order to keep us from becoming socially comfortable, socially involved with idolaters, which could lead to intermarriage. So since it was difficult to avoid eating bread of idolaters completely, so the Chachamim therefore permitted eating bread from a general bakery made for everyone, as long as the ingredients and the utensils are of course kosher. That's obvious. Whereas on the other hand, bread made in an individual goy's home, in an individual goy's kitchen, is always also and never permitted. Whereas the breads made in commercial bakeries and so forth, as long as the ingredients are kosher, would be permissible and not come under the aegis of this Isa, which you find in the Mishnah, Pas ve'Hashemen shelahem. And the shemen, the oils. So the Mishnah continues and says, Rabbi ubeis dinoi, Rabbi and his Bezdin, hitiu b'shemen. They reversed the earlier decree, which we find in the beginning of the Mishnah, Apas ve'Hashemen shelahem. So Rabbi ubeis were matir the shemen. They reversed the earlier gezerah of Chazal, prohibiting oil, and they permitted oil of idolaters. What does that mean, Lemaise? As a rule, we've found this before as well. As a rule, a later Bezdin, a later court, does not have the authority, does not have the power to reverse a rabbinic decree made by an earlier court. However, Rebbe saw that this gezerah of Chazal did not take hold, was not accepted. The majority of the people did not take it on. And therefore, this gave him the right to reverse the earlier decree. The Rav says, Ve'Hashemen ro shelo poshat isuroi. They saw that the Yisrael did not spread, did not take hold. V'nimnu olavi tiru, and therefore they had a bezdin agodol mimenu, and they were matir it kidemasik b'maslisik. Dog the Mishnah weiter, the Mishnah continues its list of items of an idolater that are prohibited for eating only. Ushlokois, the Chachamim also prohibited cooked food of idolaters in order to, again, keep Jews from becoming comfortable, involved, socially active with non-Jews, since this could lead to intermarriage. This shalokos is the key source for bishul akum. The cooked foods of idolaters, bishul akum, may not be eaten, even if it was cooked in kosher utensils, and we're certain that only kosher ingredients were used. Now, here there's an very important footnote in the Hilchos Bishul Akum, that the only foods that are subject to this prohibition are those foods which cannot be eaten raw. She'enan ne'echolin chai, foods that cannot be eaten raw. So carrots can be eaten raw, but tomatoes can be eaten raw. Peppers can be eaten raw, etc., etc. And also, that's condition number one. She'eina necholin chai. She'eina necholin chai. So if they're eina necholin chai, they come under the restriction of bishul akum, and also that are fit to be served at a meal of royalty. Nechal al shulchan melochim. So in addition, if a Jew assisted with the cooking, for example, put on the fire, stirred the pot, then again, the food is permitted. The Rav says very importantly here, shloko is called davar shebishlois akum. Vafilu bishlois, even he cooked it in his own in the kelim of Israel and in front of him, where we're not concerned with taroivus isu, still asru mishum bishulei akum. It's also because of bishul akum, but that is only if shelo siyeh bo Israel lo b'tchila lo b'sof. Sagt die Mishnah weiter. Ukevoshin shedarkan losses osichan yain v'chometz. Pickled foods such as vegetables, kosher fish, and meat, if they're the type into which idolaters typically put wine or vinegar. So these foods may not be eaten, since it is likely that the prohibited wine or vinegar was added as part of the pickling process. Nevertheless, they're not prohibited behano, since any wine or vinegar that was put into the pickling process by now has disintegrated and does not give any time and does not give any taste, and therefore it's mutar behano. Next case is v'torish trufa, finely chopped taris fish, finely chopped taris fish, taris trufa. Why finely chopped? So in order for a fish to be kosher, it must have fins and scales. Now since the taris has fins and scales, we may eat it as long as we clearly recognize that it is a taris, even without actually seeing its fins and scales. But therefore, if the taris is cut into larger pieces, in which case we can recognize it through the appearance of the head or the spine, it's permissible, absolutely. However, when it is chopped up so finely to the point that we can no longer identify the head or the spine, so we're concerned that there may be non-kosher fish mixed with it, and therefore in such a case, the taris of an idolater becomes also. That's why the Mishnah says taris trufa. Trufa means finely chopped. V'tzir, the next case, v'tzir shein badaga kil b'shitetis boy. Fish brine, tzir is fish brine that does not have kilbis, a type of non-kosher fish, swimming in it. What is this about? So tzir, fish brine, is the juice that comes out of fish when it is salted. It was used at the time of the Mishnah as a dip or to flavor foods. So fish brine of an idolater may not be eaten, since we are concerned that it contains brine of a non-kosher fish, which of course is also. However, if the brine has kilbis fish in it, it may be eaten, since the kilbis cannot exist or cannot be mixed with any other non-kosher fish brine. It just doesn't come together. It just doesn't mix. Ve'achilak. What's a chilak? Chilak is chilak fish. Chilak is a small fish that does not have fins and scales when it is young. Nevertheless, it is a kosher fish, since it develops the fins and scales later. However, chilak, which was sold in large quantities, may not be purchased from an idolater, even when not cut up, because similar looking non-kosher fish which are not easily identifiable, may be mixed with it. At chilak, the koiret shel chiltis, a grain, the koiret shel chiltis, a grain of chopped chiltis, a very sharp tasting vegetable, is chiltis. Yes? When an idolater uses his knife for non-kosher food, for example, when a goy uses his sharp knife to cut hot non-kosher meat, it absorbs, as we spoke many times, it absorbs the time, the flavor of that also food. So when the goy then goes and chops the chiltis with the same knife that he used to cut non-kosher food, the sharp tasting chiltis draws out the non-kosher flavor from the knife, and therefore makes the chiltis also. Furthermore, it prohibits the chiltis even if 24 hours have passed from the time that the knife was last used for non-kosher food. Favos. We always say that the flavor was absorbed in a utensil, has a bad taste once 24 hours have passed from that time that it was absorbed. What we call and what we made reference to earlier as pogum. After 24 hours, it becomes pogum, and therefore can no longer prohibit food into which it is absorbed. But here is the big exception. The big exception is that the sharpness of the chiltis renews the forbidden taste, even though after 24 hours it's pogum. After the sharpness of the chiltis renews the prohibited taste, and it is therefore also. And then the last mention of the Mishnah is melach salkontis. Melach salkontis. Salkontis salt. What is salkontis salt? This is a type of coarse white salt that was typically smeared with pig's fat or fat of non-kosher fish, and was a delicacy eaten by members of Rome's upper class. Melech Sarkontis says the Rav Melech shekol gedoyle roimi, the upper class of Rome, ochlin also. Uregilin limshoyach oisa, and it was smeared b'chol chazir, ub'shuman dogim tmeim, v'hi gasa, it's coarse, u'levana b'yoisa. So the Mishnah sums it all up, that all of these that we have seen in the Mishnah, Arei elu asurin, these are all prohibited to eat, ve'ein isuran no. But the isur is only an isur achila, it is not an isur no. We may derive benefit from them. Okay.